But thank you for being here. The information I'm going to share here is not a coincidence that you've been brought here to hear it. With my people, we are told that you're brought here to hear it for purposes that you will encounter in the future. So here we go. I'm going to move really quickly. Now, the reason why I'm going through some of the history is because I don't know more. It didn't just happen overnight. It's a historical event. Our resistance as Indigenous people began long ago. And part of that resistance is remembering that other activists and other human rights defenders. Okay, so when Canada created the Indian Act in 1876, it created 200 crimes that only can be committed by an Indian. And we still see a lot of the effects of the Indian Act today. And part of that is holding a potlatch, hiring a lawyer to pursue land rights, keeping a child home from Indian residential schools. There's something unique about my background, and I'll quickly share that. I never went to residential school. Neither did my parents, and neither did my grandparents. And we were the hidden children. I was very fortunate in that way. Since the Indian Act was amended to repeal the prohibition on hiring, there's been a slew of cases and a slew of cases where Indigenous people have been charged and convicted for defending their human rights. And this is the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline in the Switsun territory in 2010. In the last 2 decades, Canada has been the object of hundreds of blockades, sit-ins, train blockades, occupations, and even armed confrontation. And this is a picture from the Oka crisis. The Mohawk, and there's people here that are more informed about that. I did only a little bit of research, but we all know that the history of the Mohawk and the Kahnawake and their blocked roads and the bridges, and no golf course was ever built as a result of that. One of the supporting blockades at Lillooet in British Columbia, the people were also blockading development of their smallpox burial grounds. And this is a picture of them being arrested for blocking the highway that runs right through their reserve. They were arrested for blockading that. And this is Suepmik. I'm not good in that language of saying there, and I apologize for that. But in 1995, 17 sun dancers in Suepmik fenced in their sacred arbor against cows. And for that, the ensuing conflict involved 400 RCMP, 6 APCs, and 77,000 rounds of ammunition fired at their camp. And this is Gustafson Lake. And there was even a C4 landmine that was blown up below in the corner here of this picture of the truck. Ipperwash, Stony Point in 1995, there was a protest, and as a result, the Ontario government panicked, and Dudley George was shot, and he died as a result of that. It was a fatal shot. And Nuax, hereditary chiefs stood together in the corner there. You see the picture where they're blocking to protect their most sacred island from logging. And this was 1995, and they did it again in 1997. Grassy Narrows, the people have been protesting, blocking roads, launching court action since the 1980s. Logging continues even as they protest and argue in court. And this is a picture of the devastation and their continued protesting. The Lubicon Cree say they are not able to practice their way of life. There's been so much damage. This is part of their territory. These are the infamous tar sands in Alberta. Burnt Church, the Mi'kmaq, even though the Supreme Court recognized their treaty rights in 1999, they still get convicted even though the court affirmed their right to fish. And this is the Indigenous women, the Walk for Justice, representing alarming majority of cases of unsolved disappearances, the murdered and missing women. There's more and more research connecting the murdered and missing women to the devastation and destruction of land. The Athabasca and the Mikisew Cree, these are our neighbors. I'm from the Treaty 6, they're Treaty 8. They're like, we could throw rocks at each other. They're close to our territories. This is their lands that we've shared hunting grounds with them. This is their lands now. This is the expansion of the tar sands and the devastation of it. We received information that an additional 148 companies will be coming into their territory. The tar sands are expanding into Treaty 6, into my people's lands. There's acid rain that's coming out of the Alberta tar sands. If you don't know that, you need to get yourself informed very quickly, because the tar sands are the largest destructive force to the earth, and they are the single one monstrous devastation to the earth. Canada is the last nation in the world, or state in the world, that has the largest bodies of fresh water. This is a picture of a mutated fish from the waters from the tar sands, and that's just a small portion of that. We no longer can hunt in those lands. The water is so toxic in Fort McKay and in the surrounding area that they no longer can shower there with the water. And if you think that that's the only problem, if you go further south, I met a white woman. Her name was Jessica Ernst. You can Google her. She has a website. I'm surprised that more people don't know about her. I'm astounded at what she's enduring from the Canadian state, and especially from the Alberta government. She's from a community called Rosebud, Alberta, and they can no longer drink the water. She has to haul her water, and she's taking the Alberta government to court, and she's been at it for 7 years. And their tactics and their acts of just violation against her are just astounding. But she talks about that. There's a Delgamuukw case. This one affirms the Aboriginal title. It affirms Aboriginal title, yet the Canadian state continues to violate that title. Continues, even as there is a Supreme Court decision affirming it. In 2003, the people stood again to bar access to the industrial salmon feedlots in their territory. Again, they were criminalized. And this is, I won't say the name because I don't pronounce it very well. In 2004, the people built winter lodges in a ski resort at Sun Peaks in British Columbia. The lodges were bulldozed, and expansion went on in spite of protest, blockades, and legal action. The 1862 map of the Squamish Indian Reserves include the ski resort. So this is not something that was not a part of treaty, it was. This is one of the signs that was posted there. And this is 2004, no Indians allowed past this point. 2004. That was from the BC government. And all of you must know this history more than I do, so I won't go into detail. But this is Caledonia, and this is in your territories. And again, this is from here. And again, there was a bridge that was burned, and the Indigenous people were never compensated for it. And the land was never returned to them, but yet the businesses were compensated $20 million. And this is from I can't say the word, so I'll just let you read that. In 2006, 6 of their leaders, 2008, 6 of their leaders were imprisoned for rejecting the unequal opportunity to consult with Latinx over mining plans. They were imprisoned for 2 months and released. The leadership of this community had to pay the company to stay out of their territory for now. How bizarre is that, right? To pay a company to stay out of your own lands. The Rocky Mountains. The Canadian economy has been underwritten by resource industries operating on unceded Indigenous lands for over 200 years. Many of the logging clear cuts are so extensive they can be seen from space as the tar sands. The same with the tar sands. The tar sands are as big as Indonesia now. And these are all the toxic sites. If you don't know, there's thousands of them in Turtle Island. Again, demonstrations, protests and blockades. This is some of the stuff that we were seeing as we were protesting. Bill C-45, this is what triggered Idle No More. Canada created a suite of legislation, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. We're the original organizers. How that happened for me is somebody tagged me on Facebook about Bill C-45, and I wasn't too interested at first, but I have a law degree, and something compelled me to go back in there and take a look at it, and when I did, I was horrified. And then there's something in law called acquiescence. Acquiescence means your compliance is consent, which means if you're silent, then your silence is consent. And I knew that. And I told the other ladies, we cannot be silent. We have to say something. Even if we have to stand in a corner somewhere and give out pamphlets, we have to let people know about this. So on November 10th in Saskatoon, we're all educators. I was teaching university classes at the time, so we knew that education was really critical, and we wanted to reach out to people. And I know that the media said that Idle No More began on Facebook. That's not totally accurate. How it happened was they brought us out exactly what's happening here. They brought us out, and we reached out, and it was our relationships in the communities that brought people out. I didn't know very much about Facebook. I especially didn't know anything about Twitter. I didn't even know how to create an event page on Facebook. After Idle No More, I had a sharp learning curve. Well, by this time, we realized that people didn't know anything about Bill C-45. And we were determined to reach out. And when we reached out, it was the grassroots people that answered our call. The first people to come forward were women. And it was amazing. I don't know why, but it resonated with women for some reason. They came forward and they're like, why don't you come to Regina and do a teach-in over there? And we're like, okay. We just didn't even think of it. The voice of Idle No More, and this is what we found out about Idle No More. When we first did the teach-in, we reached out to Erica, and she said, yeah, I'll come out. I'll come out and speak. And then the spoken word poet said, you know, my voice is not political, but I have a poem that I want to share. And we were like, okay, come on over. And then this politician said, hey, I know something about Bill C-45. I want to come share my information. And we're like, a youth, a spoken word poet, and a politician. We're like, okay, come on over. And then it just created this mix of people. And it became, as we were moving forward, we began to realize that Idle No More's voice, the grassroots voice, was creative. It was prayerful. And then we had artists that were coming to us and saying, I have artwork and it has a message for Idle No More. Can I paint it? And we're like, okay, sure. And then she gave us t-shirts of this amazing, amazing artwork. And it became like a lot of the logo that you see with I Don't Know More, with the feather and the hand up in the air. In our first rally, our first couple of rallies, there was these women walking with a feather. And I think that's where it came from. They just were walking in a rally with a feather. I think I began to realize something amazing was happening, because when I was in Edmonton, never in my life did I ever think I was going to be walking with 2,000 people, right? So I'm walking along there, I look over, and there's like other brown people from other nations walking there, and there was white people over here, and I began to realize it wasn't an Indigenous issue anymore, because I began to realize water affects everybody. It affects everyone. And it went into Montreal, Edmonton. I was there in Edmonton when this picture was taken, and I was even in Toronto, Whistler. I wasn't there, but from James Bay to Ottawa, Attawapiskat with Chief Spence. What an amazing lady. And Cape Breton, Windsor, Vancouver, Victoria, Beardies, Okimasis, CN Rail, Portage la Prairie, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Lethbridge, Kitchener, Sarnia. Young people stood up. That was what made I Don't Know More different. Young people wanted to sing their songs. Young people wanted to learn their language, and they stood up. That was what made it so amazing. I had this friend, she's like my white friend since forever. All of a sudden she sends me a text message. She's like, Sylvia, I'm going to a flash mob round dance at Midtown Plaza in Saskatoon. I'm like, who is this? It's got Lisa's name, but who the heck are you? And I'm like, and she's like, it's me, Lisa. I'm like, okay, this is weird. But she was going to the flash mob round dance, and she was dancing. She was sending me pictures. And that's what made it so amazing. And in the West Coast, from coast to coast, and then went international. That's Norway, Hawaii, Kenya, and then there was Morocco. We got this message, and I still get emotional when I think about it. About a month ago, we got a message from the Amazon, and it was Chief Roney, and they're resisting against the dams that are being built in their territory. And they told us that there was guns, there was ammunition and military standing there, and they're standing there with their spears, and they were chanting, I Don't Know More. And that was the message that they sent to us. And it resonated with people all over the world. It went across the Americas, overseas, Twitter. It was trending fourth, I think, on Twitter. And on January 28th, I was in London, United Kingdom, speaking to people. So one of the reasons why I Don't Know More happened was I understood about the treaties. I am a direct descendant of a treaty people from the Treaty 6 territory, and I understood that what we were doing was a relationship with the British Crown, and part of that was I understood that the treaties were being violated, and this treaty relationship was protected. And the Lord Denning was said that yes, these are treaty agreements. Lord Denning said that these are international instruments and that they are treaties. And I won't go into that, but the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People was adopted by Canada, and that article, these are articles from there that state that Indigenous people have a right to lands, territories, and resources. And part of that understanding is to recognize and honor those treaties. And that's free, prior, and informed consent is the highest standard at the international level to be applied when talking about lands and resources with Indigenous people, and Canada does not honor that. They absolutely do not honor that. What are human rights? We're here today to talk about human rights. What are human rights, right? So I went into the website, and this is the most basic. And if you look at number 2, it says, universal human rights are often expressed and guaranteed by law in the form of treaties. In treaties. And this is what happened when the British Crown came here and we made treaty. Our human rights are enshrined in those documents. Our humanity is enshrined in those documents. And people forget that. Certainly the Harper government has forgotten that when they went in and unilaterally changed the lands of my people. When we speak of human rights, when is the right time to defend them? When is the right time to defend them? Does someone have to die first? Does there have to be a mass death of a people before we say that we need to defend human rights? Does the violation have to be visible for us to act on things? Does it have to happen in other countries? It's happening here. The violation of our human rights is happening here. It's not just happening to Indigenous people now, it's happening to the Canadian citizens. Bill C-45 is not the only bill going through Parliament, and I have some paperwork here that you can take with you that shows you the bills that are going through the Parliament. To date, almost all the bills have already gone through that violate that treaty relationship, that extinguishes treaty. C-45, we all know that. C-2, family homes on reserve, it's passed. CS-8, C-27. The Education Act is the one that really frightens me, and also S-212. At the time when my people took treaty, there was a treaty term and promise to education. And that treaty term and promise of education is something that I hold very dearly because my people struggle with poverty. There's a systemic racism in this country that excludes my people from accessing the very things that are readily available to other Canadians. And I will protect that opportunity for my generations. And education is one of them, because at the time of treaty making, that was a treaty term and promise, and the Harper government is going to extinguish that. They're going to extinguish it, make no mistake. If that First Nations Education Act goes through Parliament, and when Parliament opens on October 18th, they will fast track that because it will extinguish the treaty term and promise to education. I was in Saskatoon. They were having a consultation meeting. Not very many people know about this, but we tried to get in there. There was a bunch of grassroots people and I were standing at the steps. This affects my people. It affects my people, and yet they locked the doors and wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't let us in. And we tried to open the door. We were like struggling with the door and trying to open it, and there was blood on the door. There was a struggle, and they tried to exclude us. But we got in there, and we were determined to hear what was being said. But after that, they still were putting it under the guise of consultation and consent. They still do not have our consent, and yet they're moving forward as if they are. If they find one Indigenous person that says yes, that means all of us say yes. Even though all the rallies all across Turtle Island and globally, a resounding no has been heard all over the world, but not in Canada, not on Turtle Island. The Self-Government Recognition Bill will extinguish Indigenous sovereignty, will extinguish our inherent right to the lands and the waters. And I'll tell you right now, the treaties and Indigenous sovereignty is the last stand before the unfettered access to the destruction of land and water. It is the last stand. A lot of non-Native people know that now. They're beginning to understand that. I'm going to tell you quickly some of the things that history does not tell you as non-Native people, and you will never hear this in any history book. It's slowly being told now only because I've gotten past feeling that shame to talk about it. When I was growing, I'm a product of it. I'm a third generation of this. This is hidden from history. That's my brother in the far corner. His name is Sterling. He was only 6 years old at the time. And that's my family. That's pictures of us. I remember the Indian agent still in the Hudson Bay Company. And I don't think I'm that old. But, and from the time when I was 5, 6 years old, I never had a full year of elementary school, and I never had a full year of high school. Well, no, for my grade 12, I insisted on staying until June so that I could graduate with my class. And the reason why was the Indian Affairs Department had a policy called the sugar beet policy. And that policy sent Indigenous children to go and work on the fields in Alberta, on the sugar beet fields. And we were sent there at the end of April, and we stayed till the end of August. And it was called employment training. And it was something that nobody ever did anything about. There's this major highway, Coaldale, Lethbridge, Tabor, and there would be rows and rows of sugar beets right off that highway that people drove by, and they seen us working there. Little 5-year-old kids on older, all of us working there, and nobody ever did anything. Nobody ever said anything, and we were forced to work there. We'd be 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. We were working out there. I remember when we first start working, sometimes at night, my brothers who were younger than me didn't quite adjust to the work schedule, would be crying because there would be blisters and different things, and my mom would be up like half the night trying to bandage their feet and trying to get rid of the blisters and different things like that. So that's something that happened to my people. And you're not going to find that in any Canadian history book. But I've got copies of that story that if you want, you can pick it up. And the ironic thing was, the farmers and all of the surrounding people used to call us grab-a-hoe Indians, like the garden hoe. They called us that. And we used to, like, I even remember still the numbers, like the sugar beet rows would be a half mile long. 9 rows is 1 acre. The first hoeing in the spring was like, I don't know, $15 an acre. Those are the kind of things I still remember. And we used to see that sugar beet field there? Usually a farmer would be following us, making sure we didn't miss a weed. So that's part of the history that I'm a product of. And I'm taking my pilot's license right now. I'm training for that. But how I wanted to become a pilot, now it's kind of like a horrible memory of it, but at the time I was so interested that my interest was triggered while we were working on those fields, this farmer would be spraying chemicals on the field. And I didn't know they were toxic. And afterwards, our skin would begin to blister. See, that's the kind of things that the injustice that I still remember. So when last year, when I first heard about Bill C-45, before that, I was writing a book on a chapter about land. And in my mind, in my childhood, I remembered the lands and the waters of my people. And I was thinking I would go back to that to reconnect so that I could write the chapter on land. So when I did, I was just stunned at the devastation in my people's territory. I was stunned. I think I was going through like grief that summer. You ever get that feeling when you fall in love with someone, when you first fall in love and you're always thinking about them, right, and you can't stay away from them? Well, that's how I felt that last summer when I was going back into the land. I was like camping out there. Don't do that. Bambi does not live out there. It was like, there was like a cougar circling my camp, you know? It was very interesting trying to go back. It was extraordinary, but at the same time, it was heart-wrenching. It was heartbreaking because I couldn't find the waters anymore. I did find one stream, and I'm protecting that right now. I was so desperate that I even went around posting signs. That's the second picture there. I was like, Treaty 6 territory, no trespassing. That's what I was posting. And then here's this little woman going around all over my people's lands, and I'm like hammering away, and I'm falling off the trees. And and I was so determined. I wanted them to stay out of there because they were logging. They were logging without the consent of my people. They were burning down our hunting cabins, and they were blocking roads that led to my people's territories. They were blocking them as early as even last week. Roads that I used to be able to, this one road that I used to be able to access to go into my dad's hunting territory was blocked. So I emailed the guy. I'm like, hey, Dave, what the heck's going on here? He hasn't responded yet. But those are intentional. I have documents stating that they're intentionally blocking access to hunting lands. I'm not saying it because I don't like them. I'm saying it because I have documents that states that. There are 3 elements to nationhood. When you go to the international discourse, there are 3 elements to nationhood: land, language, and culture. And what's going to happen? Let me ask you a question. If France were to lose their land tomorrow, would they be a nation? Would they still be a nation? Yeah, no, hey? That's where we're at. That's where we're going to be at as Indigenous people. We are going to be landless. Moving forward, decolonization. Anti-racism, anti-oppressive education, that needs to be taught. People need to know what happened. The human right to clean water and lands, that's a right for everybody. Everybody. Allies, the question that allies should be asking, hopefully, is how can we support you? How can we support you? Don't help us. We know how to help ourselves. The question here is, how can we support you? And we'll tell you. It's not hard. Restoring Turtle Island. What I mean by that is after we go through the educational part of decolonization and all that wonderful stuff, we always have this image of Canada as democratic, justice, all these wonderful things about Canada, right? There's this veil of innocence that Canada puts to the world. We're democratic, we're multicultural, there's justice, there's equality, right? And they protect that. Canadian citizens, they protect that. They hold it around them like a veil of innocence. What Idle No More is doing is we're poking at that and we're saying, what about the residential schools, right? What about the sugar beet policy? What about that? How about the Indian Act, right? What about the Indian Act? What about those mass graves of children still buried in Saskatchewan? Yes, we have mass graves of children that have died in residential school. You don't have to go to a different country to find our own mass graves here. They exist. That's a part of the restoring of Canada. The colonizer laws can be repealed. That's the best part of this story. It can be repealed. They can put all their laws through the parliament right now. But if they can repeal a gun law that they spent millions of dollars on, they can darn well repeal C-45 and all the other laws. A nation is not conquered until the hearts of its women are on the ground, then it is done, no matter how brave its warriors or strong its weapons. And I'm not done. I'm not done. I will defend for my lands and my waters because I have to leave something for the generations to come. At the time when Idle No More first began, we went to the elders. We turned to our lodges and our ceremonies, and the elders said, it's time to invoke one of our most sacred laws. They said, and our law, and people think that Indigenous people are lawless. That's ridiculous. I'm telling you right now, we're not a lawless people. We have sacred laws that are still spoken about and that we still follow. And one of them is a law called Natamawasuin. Natamawasuin is invoked in time of great threat and crisis. And that law means to defend for all children, including your children, all the children of the world, and not just there, but all of creation's children, which is the animals and the plants and everything that gives life. So that's what we did. And all of you know Sheila McLean is not Indigenous. They call her Aboriginal, but she's not even Métis. She's blonde and blue-eyed, and she's my white sister now. And she walks with us. She understands that law, that she's defending for all children as well. So that's how Idle No More began, and it's continuing. We called for another day of action, October 7th. So I invite all of you, if you want to create an event, be at an event, go to our website, because James Anaya will be arriving in Canada. He is the UN Special Rapporteur for Indigenous issues, so we need to be loud that we still do not give our consent for our lands and our waters to be devastated. That's it. Kinanaskum no, minakahkyo kita tamskat no, nanaskumuni pinto tawig. Thank you for listening to me, and I shake hands with every one of you, and thank you for allowing me in your territory and your lands. Nai hai.